guys, my guest tonight, Gina Rock, is the longest flying tenured Tinkerbell at Disneyland. And she's here to share her story with us. See you in about 5 minutes. Grab your popcorn and snacks. Find a comfy spot, take a seat or lie down, and let me transport you to a place of fantasy, ghost stories, ancient legends, odd creatures, alien encounters, and other magical topics. You may even decide to join the conversation. From faraway lands to your own backyard, with a small dash of pixie dust. Turn out the lights and open your minds. The journey is about to begin. Hey everyone, welcome to California Haunts Radio. My name is Charlotte. I'm going to be your host for the next hour. I'm also the owner of the California Haunts Paranormal Investigation Team, based out of sunny Sacramento, California. We are 45 strong up and down the state, which means if you think you might have a paranormal thing going on, we can get to you. It might take us 1 or 2 days because California is a huge state, so, but we will get you help. In fact, if that's the case, then I have mediums and psychics on staff who can phone you and talk to you about what possibly is going on in your home or business. And in most cases, they can calm things down before we get out there. All right, but we will get you help. All right, help is on the way. Anyway, again, my name is Charlotte, and I'm excited about tonight's show. I'm a Disney adult, always have been a Disney adult. And to be able to do a show like this with Tinkerbell, Gina Rock, just really, really excites me. So first, before we get started, I want to tell you a few things. If you're watching from Facebook and you like what you see tonight, please feel free to hit those like buttons and the smiley faces and the thumbs up buttons. The reason why is because there's an algorithm on Facebook, and the more of those that you put up, the further up we go out in the algorithm, which means that more people will see the show. Because if you don't get that kind of thing, it kind of sits stagnant pretty much where it is. But by doing that step, it gets out to more people. The same thing with YouTube. If you're watching from YouTube and you like what you see and hear tonight, be sure to put a thumbs up, heart, smiley face, whatever, to get us up higher in the algorithm. Because it does help, and it's been helping a lot. I see a lot of changes when I go into my analytics, like on YouTube, and I see what's going on. So those things actually do help. Anyhow, also, before I forget, if you're also watching from Facebook and you haven't done so already, and you want to, feel free to follow on YouTube if you haven't done so already. Check out the YouTube page. We have 621 shows over there, and there are all kinds of topics. I'm a journalist, photojournalist, and so I hate covering paranormal topics 24/7. So I will vary it, like tonight's guest being the longest tenured Flying Tinkerbell. I like to do all kinds of stuff, all kinds of different stuff to cover. So check it out, because there's a whole menagerie, and I'm sure there's something that you'll find that you like. And what I've done, because I know it can be confusing, you go in and you look and you see a ton of, I call them stories because I'm a journalist. You see a ton of shows there, and it can really do things with your mind. So what I've done is I've taken the majority of the shows. I'm still in the process of doing it. I've taken the majority of the shows and I have put them in categories. So if you want to see Nancy Matz's show, you find the Nancy Matz file. If you're into aliens and contactees, you can find the alien and contactee file. So it makes it a lot easier for you. All right. And once you do that, if you like what you saw, you like the page, and I'm also really active on the community page as well, please subscribe, because we have a lot going on this team. I teach psychic development classes. I teach all kinds of stuff. I take people on ghost hunts. So we're a real active group here. So that way you'll get notification when something comes up, including the videos. So please subscribe. All right. And again, if you're watching and you like what you see, and there's other people in your house or in your car, and you want to let them know about us, just tell them to come on and listen. Okay. Just say, hey, there's a little radio show out of Sacramento, and it's a pretty good radio show. Come on and listen. Okay. That's all I ask. All right. That being said, my guest tonight, Gina Rock, grew up like a lot of us, except that, in her case, her mother got her into ballet when she was 6 years old. And she did ballet all the way until she was 12. But you know what? I might screw the story up. So I'm going to let her tell you her story. So without further ado, Gina Rock.
I met Bob Yerkes, as I stated, and I met him at my gym in high school. And he just happened to live not even a mile from my home where I grew up. So I used to take my bike over there, and ride up there and start playing around on the apparatus. Go up to Bob Yerke's yard, and there was so many exciting people there. There was Hollywood stuntmen, and there was circus performers, and everybody was sharing in their talents, and we were trying all different kinds of things. I was doing high falls and learning how to throw a knife and jumping on the trampoline, and Bob Yerke's wife taught me how to do aerial ballet, which was very difficult. Now, that was on the soft rope. In today's world, they have the silk. But I had a soft rope, was what they call it. And I learned how to do aerial ballet, and it was very difficult. I had to keep climbing the rope in order to get my strength. And thank God I took ballet, because I had all of the form in order to pull it off and be balletic in the air, which I hated my mom for putting me in ballet because it's very disciplined. But so grateful later. I'll never forget thanking her profusely for putting me in ballet, because it was such a great asset to have that form in the air. So yeah, that's how I started.
It's a fascinating story, and I heard, and I briefly heard on the interview I listened to last night, how you decided to become Tinkerbell. Can you tell everybody about that?
So when I was about 17, I went, you know how they have grad nights at Disneyland? Okay. So I went with a date. I still remember his name. His name was Mitch. He was a surfer, big, long blonde hair. Anyway, we went to grad night. I think I was 16. He was 17. He was getting ready to graduate. That's when everybody was graduating from high school early, like 17 and a half. So we went, and I remember, we went on all the rides and everything, and we're walking down Main Street to go back to the car. And he says, oh, quick, turn around. You got to watch this. And I'm like, okay. So I turn around, and he goes, watch what happens. I said, oh, fireworks. And he said, not just that. Watch what happens. So all of a sudden, I see Tinkerbell flying off the Matterhorn, and I was so excited. I can remember turning to my date and saying, I would love to do that. And of course, I didn't even know at that point that I was going to be joining the circus. So I was 16 at that time, and I don't even believe I was in Bob Yerke's backyard yet. So if you want to go with the little premonition stuff, then that was a premonition that I had for my life, and it planted the seed for later. I mean, that seed was there, and it didn't grow until after I joined the circus. And then I actually ended up meeting Judy Kay's ex-husband, because I performed for him at a circus. And I went after the Tinkerbell job when she was taken out for 7 years in order to build Fantasyland. So that seed was planted very, very early. And I believe I'm actually of the science mind. It's all about science and facts and theories. But for me, I have a little bit of that twinge of, being a fatalist. So, your show is appropriate because I kind of understand and correlate, not just science, but wow, this has really happened to me. And then I'll, slate it as a premonition. The science part of me doesn't allow that, but, I go with it.
Right.
So right. I used to book a lot of variety entertainers. I was a talent agent for 28 years, and I booked nothing but variety performers, bands as well, and actors and actresses. But my favorite division of my of my company, Worldwide Acts, was the variety performers, which also included psychics.
Cool.
And at one point, I had to book 30 psychics for a Queen Mary event. And I'm sure you know that the Queen Mary has been stated that it's haunted.
Right.
So, maybe you can tell us a little bit about what you know about that. What do you know about that?
Well, I know I had an experience on there.
Oh, you did? Okay, I want to hear it.
Before I was a ghost hunter, officially, I was into paranormal, obviously, or I wouldn't have gotten into ghost hunting. And we went ahead to a trip to Disneyland and headed to the Queen Mary for, just to check it out. And we went on the silly ghost tour that they have, where they have everything rigged up, like the doors open and close and all that. And my friend and I were walking through one of the dining salons on the Queen Mary, and all of a sudden I felt really sick to my stomach. And I had to sit down, and the tour guide walked over and said, "Well, what's wrong?" And I said, "Well, I felt like something went through me because I was walking, and my stomach did a flip, and that was it." And so I was sitting down, and he says, "Well, there's a little girl over here that fell overboard, and she likes to, I guess she's trying to find her mother or whatever, so she likes to touch women that come on the tour or go through or hug or whatever she does." So it was pretty cool, to have that, because that's what I call getting goosed by a ghost. Is you could sit there and during an investigation or when you're doing the post part to show people, the evidence you get, and then all of a sudden your stomach flips because something goes through you.
Wow, that's when I had booked the psychics on the tour for one of those events. They told me the same thing, that when they went into the pool area, there was one gal, I had booked her quite a bit. Now, for me, it was all about entertainment, but some of them actually believed that was true. And she said she couldn't even go into the pool area anymore because she kept getting that same sense that you're talking about.
Yeah. It is very haunted. And my dad always told me the story, because my dad went through World War II, and he always told me the story about the other ship that collided with the Queen Mary and all those guys that died, in the tip of the bow area, and how there's hauntings back in there as well.
Wow. Yeah, that was an exciting time for me when I got asked to book the entertainment on the ship, and that was via Disney. So I know we're not at Tinkerbell yet, but at one point in the 80s, when I had started my company, Worldwide Acts Talent Agency, Disney had asked me if I could book performers for them. So that's how I ended up getting the Queen Mary and booking a lot of their events with my variety entertainers.
Well, it's interesting to hear, what you did outside of being Tinkerbell, because, everybody automatically thinks you gave a lifetime to flying over the parks, but to hear what you did outside is just as fascinating. Like you say, booking the entertainment and then the government job you have now.
Yeah, I think when I was a child, my mother stuck a book in my hand at the age of 3. And we were not allowed to, she believed in children going to bed. At least my parents did. I know there are many in that era that believe that children, they need to have their time to themselves, and they would put us to bed at 7:00. It didn't matter if it was light outside. As we got a little older, they, basically, we were able to stay outside a little bit longer, but we were put to bed at 7 p.m. And if it was light outside, what was I going to do? I'm awake. I'm not going to sleep. So I would read and read and read. And I started to get into stories of people, and they would go on these adventures. And I'm like, that was another seed that was planted in my youth, that I wanted to live those stories. I didn't want to just read about it. I think I knew at a young age that I was going to do a lot. That's what I wanted for my life. I didn't want to be in a cookie cutter scenario. Right. So, of course, when I was approached about Circus, of course, it's like, not just every kid's dream to go run away with the circus, or athletes think about it. Right. But yeah, of course, yes, I want to do this. And of course, my parents were beside themselves when I told them I wanted to run away and join the circus. And my poor father, who was a nuclear physicist at Lockheed Martin, is like, well, we see that you're practicing in Bob Bjerke's backyard, but we were praying and hoping that this wasn't going to happen. And of course, my mother, who knew me well, was like, I know we're never going to be able to stop Gina from doing this. And she was right. She came with me for my first audition to join a Shrine Circus act, and that was with the motorcycle that drives up the wire.
Oh, wow.
Doing single trapeze and sliding down a wire in a neck loop from the top of the girders of a building down. And wow. And I'm not going to tell you I wasn't scared. That was a really, really scary act. So
how did you get past the fear?
You don't really get past the fear. I think that if you do get past the fear, then you're in danger. Mm-hmm. I think it's very healthy to be afraid. Now, for myself, I'm always challenging myself. I've been doing that my entire life. And I'm going to mention my peers here, okay, because the gals that I grew up with, these are all straight A students and absolutely stunning women that are not only beautiful, but they're really smart. And I grew up with peers like that, and I couldn't keep up. I was the nerd. I was the gymnast. They were the learners. They were the A students. They were the homecoming queen and cheerleaders. And I was the nerd who went off and did athletics. Okay. But I was raised with them from elementary school all the way through high school, and I couldn't keep up with them. So as a result, and by the way, I'm in touch with them now. We have our 50th reunion coming up for school, and we're not going to go. We're going to all get together, and I've been talking with them on the phone. We've been revisiting together, but I find myself being an overachiever because of them. And I'm writing a memoir right now, and I'm going to dedicate it to these 5-6 women that I grew up with that made me this overachiever, because I was always trying to better myself. I didn't care if I was in the limelight, because truthfully, I'm a recluse. I'm not really social. I don't like to be in big social atmospheres. Even when I booked talent, I was never really on the job. I was always the voice behind the phone. Mm-hmm. So, yeah, I dedicate some of what I've done in my life to them, all of them.
Now, there's a big difference between 50 feet, in the air on a tightrope, and 150 feet in the air over an amusement park.
Yes, there is.
Yes, go ahead.
No, you go ahead. I mean, go ahead. Ask me that question.
How did you deal with that every night? And I know there's photos of you I've seen, that I have actually, that I got off your site, where you're kind of standing there trying to, build yourself up to make that jump. And how hard is that? You're looking down at night, all the Disney lights are on and stuff, but you realize you're that high up on a pulley.
So, as you've probably heard in many of my podcasts talking about Tinkerbell only, mm-hmm. when I first, secured the job as Tinkerbell, I had to practice in the day. And I don't think I ever really realized it was, 145, 160 feet in the air until I got up there. And I went, wow. So I had worked on trolleys before because the trolley is what carried me down the wire hanging by my neck in a neck loop when I first started, when I was barely 18. And so I was used to going from, 100 feet up into girders at the top of a building and sliding down by my neck. And that was pretty scary. But when I got into the Tinkerbell costume and I was getting ready for somebody to throw me off the Matterhorn, and it was really scary, and it was a healthy scare, rightfully so. Yes, there you go. And, you see this photo at night with fireworks, but during the day, it's a whole different ballgame because you can see everything and you realize how high you are. And there's a part of you that really has to disassociate from being afraid and praying that mechanically everything's going to be okay. Mm-hmm. And as far as safety, I had the most fantastic crew. This crew was checking and rechecking equipment. They were really good at their jobs. And of course, we had OSHA on the premise. So they were always checking equipment as well. And please, for your audience, please listen to some of my podcasts. There's 7 or 8 of them on there. And we really get into details about the flight and the scary and, how did it work and wind readings and how did it feel? There's a lot of really great podcasts on my website at flyingtinkerbell.org. So I'm hoping your audience will visit those. And especially the last one, I got one of my crew guys to talk about his time on the crew. So you get to hear it from not just Tinkerbell's side, but the crew side. And that's Bruce McGuire. We just did a podcast together, and it's wonderful. Please listen to it.
I know when I was there in February, I got stuck on the Matterhorn, and they had to evacuate us out. And, when I was reading the stuff on your website about how you got into the Matterhorn to get up to the top, I even rode the elevator. And we're not supposed to film on there, because they don't want to let all the secrets out. But it was interesting just because I thought of you, even though I didn't know you at the time. And I thought, this is the way Tinkerbell goes up, to jump off the Matterhorn. And I just thought it was unique because nobody expects the Matterhorn to have like the stairs and the elevator and all that in there.
Yeah, it's, you hear the stories of what is internal in the Matterhorn, but it really is amazing. When they built it, it looks like a giant attic. Mm-hmm. And yes, there's a basketball court up there. There's a hoop that was installed up there because it kind of looks like a basketball court. Mm-hmm. But yeah, it's the first time I went up, I think it's 5 flights up in the elevator, and then you come out and then you walk up these large stairs, 2 sets of large stairs. I don't know how many steps there are. I didn't get into the detail at the time, but at least 20 steps a piece. And then you get into a ladder that is hung, a metal ladder that is hung and attached to get up to the hatch. And that's about 6 or 7 steps to get up to the hatch. So there has been times when the elevator broke, and we have actually had to walk through the Matterhorn. I don't remember how we did it, but my crew was fabulous at that. Mm-hmm. And they had their flashlights with them, and we had to physically walk through the Matterhorn in order to get up there because the elevator was broken. I think it happened 2 or 3 times in 22 years.
Now, before you would launch, obviously they hooked you into a harness. The harness was underneath your outfit, right?
Oh yes, the harness. It was it's kind of hard to explain. The harness had two different adjustments over the years. There was the straps. In fact, you can see it there. Okay. Yeah. So what they finally did after, I think, 12 years, they decided to put the costume on over the harness. Now, I didn't like that because I worked really hard to keep my small figure. And in that last photo that Joshua put up on our site, I hate that photo because I look like I'm gargantua. I said, Joshua, why did you put that photo up? I look like I'm, I weigh about 190 pounds. And he said, well, you have the harness underneath. I'm like, okay. But yeah, I was very self-conscious about that photo. So when they had the harness outside of the costume, I felt like I still had my little Tinkerbell figure. Because, of course, it would pull my waist in. So I'm glad that you showed that photo because I worked very hard to keep in shape and make sure that I looked the part up there. And of course, I was an athlete my whole life, so that wasn't too hard for me to do, but important for me to do.
And then not to mention that you had to be a certain weight for that unit, too. I mean, they didn't want anybody real heavy.
Well, when Stan Freeze first hired me, it was so embarrassing. I went in there, and my ex-husband was with me on my very first interview with Stan Freeze. And we went to his office, and I was told to bring a pair of leotard and tights. And I don't know if you know this, but the circus performers wear those fishnet tights. They're tan in color. So I brought my fishnet tights and a leotard with me. And sure enough, he asked me to change into it. And that's because they wanted to make sure that I represented the Tinkerbell figure. And at the time, right before I knew I was going to have to do the interview, I think I was at 119 pounds. And I was so scared that I wasn't going to get the job because I was too big that I got all the way down to 112. I mean, I was really tiny. So when he asked me to put that on, I knew, and my figure was like 24, like 34, 24, 34. I had a perfect figure at the time. And, I was embarrassed, though, to be in his office. And Stan, I believe, is writing a book right now, and hopefully he listens to this. And so I was very embarrassed and really glad my ex-husband was there. And So I changed quickly back into my clothes because I was so embarrassed to come out there and show him my figure. So yeah, that's how that interview went. Because of course they weren't going to be able to audition me by flying.
Right.
So he auditioned me, and I brought in a book of all of my circus pictures, which is 2 inches thick, and so. That has, my whole history of circus in there.
Now, the outfits they had you into, they were always trying to improve on the outfits. And I remember flipping through your website and the one with all the mirrors. At first, not knowing what I was looking at, my first thought was Pebbles. When they got all the mirrors on there, for your outfit. But I know that they had several different outfits for you, like the neon ones and all that. Did they all fit the same, or were they tailored for you, or were they just general costumes?
Yes, we would. It's so funny because Disney Dan did a reel of all the history of Tinkerbells, and he was making fun of my costumes looking like Disco Tinkerbell, but I never thought of it like that. I thought it was hilarious. So yes, they had us come in, and we would go in, and the wardrobe department had specific people that would measure us and fit us to our costumes. And of course, when they finally got to using the harness underneath, that is my favorite picture. I love the LED lights. It was a lot of work to use the LED lights. So you see the picture of the lit up wings and the lit up costume and the hair. So picture this. You see that, and I literally had wires running down my arms, my shoes lit up, my hair lit up, the wings lit up, the costume lit up, and I had a red button in my hand. So what I would have to do, as well as the wand lit up, what I would have to do is get ready to not only fly, but I had to remember that the minute I was to leave the Matterhorn to fly, I had to click that button to make sure everything lit up. Wow. And I used to make a joke that I was basically the Christmas tree. So I was the one who said everybody would get excited and go, oh, okay, let's, put all the lights up and I'm going to be the one to plug it in. Well, I had to make sure I had to push that button or I was not going to light up. And so on top of worrying about being graceful and I really hope this looks good and get myself into a whole Tinkerbell mode, I had to think about the mechanics as well.
Absolutely. This crash landing you had to do was famous as well. And I don't know where they land now, because I was just there in February and they have that route around the castle, which is kind of cool when they fly. But as far as what you did, you had to go pretty much head first into a mattress, right?
Well, it was only head first if you hadn't been a circus performer and you weren't sure how to turn. But of course, as an aerialist and having flown on the trapeze, there was a movement that you would do where you would get, 10 feet from landing and you would turn your shoulder so that you could make sure that you didn't hurt the wings or any other part of the costume, as well as make it very easy for the gentlemen that were holding the mattress to catch it.
And that, what was it? The flight was like 30 seconds, right?
No, actually, the perfect flight was 24 seconds.
Okay.
They wanted that flight to not be less than 24 and not more than 28 seconds. Now, there was times when that went awry, and I did state that on another podcast, that there was a tailwind and the trolley had been adjusted the night before because of a very strong headwind. And they had to loosen up the trolley and the brakes so that I could make it through an 18-mile-an-hour wind. But the next day, the brakes were not set back, and I flew in at 18 seconds and knocked the crew down.
Wow.
Yeah, so...
Well, there must be a lot of momentum. I mean, because it is kind of on a downhill slope, too. So there must have been a lot of momentum that you had for the landing.
Yeah, there was momentum. They had it. I actually brought a crew of engineers up there because there was a deficiency in the wire. Before they put the counterweight ups, it was dipping with the heat.
Okay.
So when the wire started dipping, I realized that we were going to have to do something to keep the wire taut. And I went up there with the engineers, and sure enough, they put up a counterweight. And so the wire it didn't slope, on a degree angle. It was pretty steady, straight. I mean, it had to have an angle in order for me to fly, obviously.
Right.
But it wasn't a drastic angle.
When we think about this and think about you doing that, was that all your job, or was it seasonal, or how'd that work?
Well, in the beginning, in 1983, when I started, it only started when the kids got out of school, right around June, after 4th of July. Well, actually before 4th of July, because I always flew for 4th of July. So right at the beginning of June, I would start flying on the weekends. No, actually, No, I started full time. It was every single day starting in June. I think
Mm-hmm.
end of May, beginning of June. And then it would only last for the first few years. I would stop flying when they went back to school, which was like September, between the 6th and the 9th.
Mm-hmm.
So it was seasonal, and it stayed like that for a few years, and then they started backing it up, and we started working on weekends in April
Mm-hmm.
and May, and then they backed it up more, and then we started on weekends even earlier. I mean, it started backing up so far that we started doing weekends in January.
Wow.
Yeah, so it turned into much more work than it was in the beginning, which was great. I mean, I love the job.
Sure.
I think if you had heard from some of the podcasts, I
Mm-hmm.
was pregnant flying twice,
It's-
only up to 4 months, but I brought my kids to the park when they turned like 5 and 7.
mm-hmm.
I started bringing them to work with me a
What
lot.
did what did your kids think? I mean, did they realize it was you up there? Did they think it was just actually Tinkerbell or what?
Well, my kids, I brought a sitter with me, and we'd go have fun in the park before I had to go put makeup on. I'd get there, a little bit early, and we'd go play around. But my kids, of course, when you've been brought up like that, they don't think it's a big deal, except when they would stand down in the crowd and watch me fly,
Mm-hmm.
and they would point up to me, and they'd be with their sitters, and they'd say, "Oh, that's my mom." And anybody around them that would hear that were like, "What do you mean that's your mom?" And so they started wanting to get their autographs and take pictures of my children. It actually was kind of silly. I finally, put an end to that. But yeah, I mean, the audience was, if they heard that, they were like, "What do you mean?" So yeah, I mean, the kids loved the fact that they got to play at Disneyland 2 or 3 times a week. And I hated leaving my children and having
Right.
a job at night. So I just thought, well, this is the best thing. I'll just take them with me. So it was
Absolutely.
great. They were raised at Disneyland.
The view must have been tremendous. I mean, you're flying across and you got the fireworks going off, and you're lit up. But looking down on the park as you went along with the fireworks going off must have been pretty cool.
Oh, yeah. I mean, the fireworks were spectacular. People try to invite me to go see fireworks now, and I'm like, wait a minute. I I flew with fireworks for 22 years. It's not as exciting as it would be, for anyone else. But
Right.
yes, of course. Now the fireworks were very far from me, so in relationship to the Matterhorn versus where they shot the fireworks off,
Mm-hmm.
um, it was a distance. I wasn't anywhere close to it, so they would. I can't. I wish I could figure out how many feet it was, but it wasn't feet. It would have been more like 2 blocks away from me.
Okay.
So yeah, it was far away, but of course, the whole crew over there, really nice folks in that department. They used to come visit me sometimes after I would land. So yeah, it was great. I mean, everybody that worked there, my crew, the wardrobe people, everyone that worked with me was just so wonderful.
Now, when you were flying, did Tinkerbell land at the castle, or did you bypass the castle for somewhere else?
Yes, it flew by the castle.
Mm-hmm.
It kind of looked like I was going over it,
Mm-hmm.
but yes, you could see that I was flying by it.
Very interesting. I remember as a kid. I'm not going to say how old I am. because it's embarrassing, but I think people will figure it out. Your predecessor, Judy Kay, did it for quite a few years as well. And I remember going with my family. You know, when my dad always made it a point every Easter week that I was off, we would go. And I remember seeing Tinkerbell back then, and that was Judy Kay. And then after I graduated high school in '83, I got to see you because I would go once or twice a year. You know, so I got to see you fly. So I've seen two Tinks flying, as they say. And I was kind of disappointed. I went in February this year, and I was kind of disappointed because I thought, oh, good, I'm going to see Tinkerbell because they got the new, this new fireworks thing. And not to take anything away from like the Blue Fairy, but there's just something magical, especially with the route that they take the flight now around the castle. There's just something magical about that because like you look at the Disney TV show, and right away Tinkerbell is going through the castle and being, the fireworks go off. So I was kind of bummed because I really wanted to see Tink.
Yeah, there is always, over the years, as an example, the Electric Light Parade has always been a favorite of Disney fans. And there was a couple of years there, I mean, pretty much the whole time I was there, I think if there was a few, you could ask Joshua, but there was a few years where they took the light parade out because they were redoing the bulbs. But they would get hundreds and hundreds of letters from fans to please put it back. And it was no different with Tinkerbell. Apparently for the 7 years that between Judy Kay and when I did it, they had hundreds and hundreds of letters saying, when is Tinkerbell coming back? And, one of the favorite parts of being chosen for this job was the fact that the fans were so looking forward to Tinkerbell flying again. So it was not only exciting to, of course, get this job, but the fact that there was thousands of people that were just awaiting for her to fly again. And it was such an honor to be chosen.
Well, I have a couple more questions about Tinkerbell. Then we're going to shift into your after Tinkerbell life because you've had an incredible life following, your career as Tink as well. When they launched you off, and then I don't know if people realize how it worked because you just didn't simply step off the Matterhorn. You had somebody literally shove you off, right?
Yeah, literally they would grab my feet. I would stiffen up my legs really hard so that they had, a way to send me off. But yes, they would literally, there was a countdown, and over the mic, there was a countdown, and they would just shove me off. Whether I wanted to go or not, this was happening. So, yes.
It's the whole thing's fascinating because you think with Disney, because Disney has all that money and technology that they use, that they would find a simpler way to do that, but they didn't. I mean, it was just all basic.
Yeah, it was very basic, and it was my thought over the years that they definitely needed to bring the technology forward. So when they finally realized in the year 2000 that they were going to need to do something with the show, that was the 5 years that they spent trying to figure out what they wanted to do. So when they came to me and it was getting time for them to open up the new show with her flying around the castle and going back and forth, they asked me if I wanted to come back, and I said, absolutely not. I said, I have had the most wonderful run, and I actually was the person who trained the new girls.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Interesting. So we'll shift out of Tink now because I really want to interview you about your other stuff. So after Tink, is that when you started the talent agency, or was that before?
No, I started the talent agency. I realized as a stay-at-home mom, I did not want to work and be away from my children. So over the years, there was another seed planted when I was actually a magician's assistant for many, many years. And I met a gentleman who had booked, he used to be Rosemary Clooney's talent booking agent way, way back in the 80s. And I met Bill Loeb. He's passed away since, but I met Bill Loeb. He booked this magic act I was in with Dirk Arthur. And Dirk Arthur is still in Las Vegas. He's not performing right now, but I was working with him. And Bill and I started talking, and I was asking him, I knew he was an agent, and I just kept asking him what it takes to become a talent agent. I always had an affinity for very talented people. Didn't matter what they did. If they had talent, I recognized it. I was pretty good at it. So long story short, it's something I ran with the ball, and I became a licensed talent agent. I owned a Screen Actors Guild franchise for a short amount of time. I loved booking the variety entertainers. Booking the actors and actresses was less my thing. Then I got into booking comics, and that was a blast. But again, I booked all kinds of interesting people, fire eaters and sword swallowers and stilt walkers and circus performers and bands and MCs. It really was truly a variety talent agency. So that was the first thing that I did.
Disney hired your agency to do stuff for them, right?
Back in the 90s, they found out that I had a variety talent agency, and I was approached by the talent resource division, and they said, Gina, why are you not booking talent for us? And I said, well, I didn't realize you had any interest. So long story short, I started booking a lot of variety talent for them. And one of the shows or a couple of shows I booked, one that stands out to mind is when they opened up Indiana Jones. Sure. For the media event, I booked stilt walkers and globe walkers, fire eaters, sword swallowers, for the theme of Indiana Jones. And that was so much fun. That's when I did actually participate and go and help the performers, get them positioned and show positioned. And yeah, that was a blast. And then Robin Williams, when he did his second Aladdin film, they had a big, huge Disney corporate event, and I booked 30 different performers for the opening of Aladdin, as well as belly dancers for television, for promotion. So yeah, I've had some really fun jobs with Disney. I booked a Queen Mary event, as I stated, with 30 different psychics. And one time I booked an event with Queen, and I booked all of these different variety performers for the Innuendo album. And that was a blast.
I bet.
Yeah. So a huge advantage when they came and asked me. It was very exciting. Of course, I was raising my children, and that was my most important job. So I did everything from home. I worked from home. And if I had to be on property, I would go. But most of the time, I just stayed home. It was the voice behind the phone.
So when did you start this current job that you have then? How did that work? Is that after you retired from flying, or right away, or did it come after?
I closed the agency when I decided. So my daughter, let's see, she was going to college. I was raised, I'm a Valley girl. I was raised in the San Fernando Valley. And there's a college out there called Pierce College. And my daughter was going to community college first before she went to California State University. And I went with her to drop her off at school one day in 2003. I was still flying as Tinkerbell, but when I dropped her off from school, I decided to go into the counselor's office and inquire about returning to school. And at this point, I don't know, I'm in my 30s, I believe. And, I went to the counselor. They said, what do you want to take? And I said, well, I have a profound interest in physical geography. And I also have an interest in sociology, which I really was focused on in high school.
Mm-hmm.
In fact, sociology is where I thought I was going to go. And I did a lot of work with autistic children while I was doing that in high school. So I said, okay, let's sign me up for some sociology classes and physical geography. So I went over to the physical geography class, and I'll never forget. The professor says, okay, how long has it been since you've been in school? Because he was talking to all the students on the first 2 days. And I said, well, I don't know, many years, 20 years. He said, okay, no holds barred. I'm a very difficult professor. And he said, are you sure you want to take this class as one of your first classes back to college? He goes, I'll tell you what, sit in the front row and I want you to audit my class. I'm like, okay. Next thing I know, 3 days later, I'm approaching him going, this is fantastic. And he was an amazing professor. I knew I was going to learn a lot. So I stayed in the physical geography class. I did very well. And that's what piqued my interest, I believe, to going into, I had met somebody right about that time that was doing FEMA housing inspection. And he said, Gina, you're taking geography, do you like to travel? And I said, oh yeah, of course, I love to travel. Because I traveled up and down the coast with Ringling Brothers, east and west coast. I said, oh, absolutely. I said, once my children are, grown and out of the house, I'm definitely have interest. So long story short, when Katrina hit in 2005, I had already been taking all the classes from Parsons Brinckerhoff. And I got called out for my first job at Katrina.
Wow. And what was that like going out there and viewing that kind of devastation?
Well, you have to, not unlike joining the circus and not having anything to do with being born into it, it's right. The same thing. All of a sudden, I'm crossing into a world I have no idea what I'm in for. I've taken this classes with Parsons and Brinckerhoff, and I go to Houston to get ready to be deployed there, and they hand me this computer and go, here. And I'm like, what do I do with this? And they said, okay, well, we have, you've been taking the classes, but, we'll get you some help. So not only was it this horrific mess, but here I am. I don't know much about construction. Mm-hmm. And I'm not only, no pun intended, I'm not only leaping into a brand new vocation, mm-hmm. but in every which way. I've now become this disaster recovery worker that has no idea what they're doing, and I have to learn everything about building a house. Once again, I got fortunate. I met someone who was the most amazing trainer, and I learned how to build a house and put it into a computer and do intake with people that literally lost everything. Oh. And I fell in love with the profession that week. I mean, I knew that this was something that I was going to love.
Well, you're helping people doing it, and that's what's important. If you give a little of yourself to help people, that's what life's about, isn't it?
Well, it certainly was for the way I grew up. My mother was always helping folks. My mother was all about charity. My mom was helping the homeless, and she was working with hospice, and she was working on hotlines, and I got pulled into that world. I started working on hotlines, and I started helping folks and the homeless and going to the food shelters. So I grew up with that mentality. So it was already there. That seed was there from the day I was born. And so fortunate to have these parents that my dad was brilliant. You know, of course, he was the engineer. And my mom was just this amazing, charitable woman. And so fortunate to grow up in the house I did and parents that I had. It was there already.
People that that might want to get into your line of work.
Excuse me?
What do you have to say to people that might want to get into like your line of work, like with FEMA and stuff like that?
Over the years, so now I'm in my 18th year, and I have traveled to 40 states, helping folks recover from disasters. And I have run into many, many folks that wanted to get into the business. So the only thing I can say is, you know, as with any type of vocation, it has many, many changes over the years. I think if you want to start in disaster recovery, I believe that you should start out being a volunteer and see if you like it. Because I really think it's a niche that you're either going to love or you're not going to love. You have to have an affinity for helping others. My job has become extremely technical. I actually took my college and I expanded into deciding to get my bachelor's degree in emergency management. And I realized because I love disaster recovery so much that I was going to go ahead and further my education. And I received my bachelor's degree in 2015. And then I actually continued it and went to USC and took geospatial intelligence. And I work for a fabulous firm. It's Alltech.Engineering. It's global. It's a global engineering company. And it's a wonderful company to work for. I'm so grateful that I am there performing my duties as disaster recovery.
You have led such an incredible life. It's so impressive, you know, because I mean, from your beginnings, you know, with your family, and then going to in the circus life and all that, and then up to this job that you have now. When you were young, and everybody's a dreamer when they're young. Did you ever dream your life was going to be like this?
I had premonitions, what you would call premonitions. What I call maybe are just a correlation because of the scientific part of me.
Right.
I had this thing where I would get up in the middle of the night, like, you know, any human that has a bodily function in the middle of the night. And I would see these lions and tigers on the wall. In fact, I was terrified to go use the restroom because I would keep seeing these tigers and lions trying to lash out at me. And that was a little bit strange, I thought. You know, if you want to call that a premonition, you can, because I'm a young child that started about the age of... I had a lot of nightmares for some reason when I was younger. And then I had this going on, and maybe it was a circus premonition. I'm not really sure. But, yeah, I'm looking at my notes here to talk to you about some of that. And actually, what I think might be fun for your audience, but harrowing for me to discuss, my mother had a thing for reading tea leaves to us. She loved reading tea leaves. We didn't really know if she really knew how, but she loved doing it. My parents were not super religious. My father, of course, was of the science mind. I grew up with that. So I thought it was fun that my mom was into tea leaves. But one story that stands out And I think, not really sure when I heard this. I think I was in my late 20s or 30s. I remember walking with my mom. We used to do a lot of walking, and we started to, or maybe I was booking psychics at the time. I was booking a lot of psychics, and she said, I've never told you this story, but when your father was alive, we went to this party. My mom was really into dinner parties, and my mom was very social. I didn't get that from her because I'm not social. She said that there was a psychic there that was doing reading tarot cards. And when she flipped all the cards over, I believe that the death card had come out.
Wow.
And she stopped doing the reading, and she just looked right at my mother and said, "Are you sure you want me to proceed?" And my mom said, "Well, you're kind of scaring me. Maybe you want to tell me later." She came to find out that the gal knew that somebody was going to pass away, and it was going to be shortly. 6 months later, my father had a heart attack. And I get chills thinking about it. What do I think about it? Like I said, I'm still of science mind, and my father had some problems. He was on a restrictive salt diet. He had high blood pressure. His job was very difficult at Lockheed Martin. He was in a managerial position, and he was a nuclear physicist, so he had a very, very difficult job. And I believe he died of stress. But she had that reading. And there is one other story that I think your audience is going to want to hear, and it has to do with when I was a circus performer, and it has to do with my father. Okay. I'm sitting in the girders. We're waiting to do, this is Shrine Circus. It's one of the first shows I ever joined as a circus performer. And I'm in Texas, and I'm sitting in the girders, and I'm waiting for a show meeting. We were putting the show together. It was a Shrine Circus. And I'm sitting in the bleachers with a gal. I didn't really know her. Her name was Wanda Ward. And we started talking, and we were just chatting, waiting for this. I was watching Philippe Petit practice walking the high wire. I remember he was on the show. And for those of you that don't know who Philippe Petit is, he's a very, very famous high wire walker who's still alive to this day. I think he walked between the trade towers. So I'm sitting in these bleachers, and somebody walks in, a messenger walks in, and they said, "Hey, do you know where Gina is?" And I'm not going to mention my last name at the time.
Right.
And I said, "I'm Gina." And he hands me an envelope, and there's like a yellow piece of paper inside this envelope. And Wanda goes, she stopped me from opening it. She pulled my wrist, and she goes, "Gina, don't open this." And I said, "Why?" She goes, "I'll tell you later." But she said, "I want you to walk up those stairs and use the phone," because there's no cell phones. This is back in the 70s. "I want you to walk up the stairs, and I want you to call home." And I said, "Well, do you know what's in this envelope?" She goes, "No, I don't know what's in the envelope, but I want you to walk up those stairs, and I want you to call your mother." And I'm like, okay. So sure enough, I walk up the stairs, I'm opening the envelope, and it says, "Please call home immediately." And it was my mother telling me that my father had a massive heart attack. I came to find out later, Wanda told me, and I'm getting the chills just thinking about it, I was the third person for this Shrine Circus to be handed an envelope to be told that a parent had died.
Wow.
And circus performers believe that everything happens in threes. I was the third one 3 years in a row to get that news. And she told me she knew before I even opened the envelope that that's what had happened.
Here's a question I've been thinking about is, you were a circus performer, you did the aerial stuff for Tinkerbell and all this. How does one go from the excitement of working as a circus performer to what you're doing now and making that shift?
Everything about disaster recovery is exciting because I'll give you an example. When I was a disaster housing inspector, I would literally go to these homes that were surrounded by flood water. I'd have these flood boots on, and I would have to go into these houses. So hopefully the water wasn't too deep because, they restricted us at some point for not entering homes when it was too deep. But I would enter these homes that were completely wiped out. They had mud all over the place. I was doing an intake on just massive amounts of messes inside these homes. Insulation all over the place. It's not that it was exciting. I think there was something about the genetics I was handed from my father where over the years, I kept getting like this little tap, like, Gina, you need to go back to school. You need to go back to school. It's almost as if I'm running into your world with the whole premonition thing. It was meant to be for me to use those genetics somewhere in my body to start using my brain and not my body. That's the only way I can put it. And it still was very physically challenging to be inspecting homes and running around the country, like I stated, 33 deployments to flooded and wiped out homes due to tornadoes or whatever it was. But it was physically challenging and I had to stay in shape. But most of all, it was all about helping people. It wasn't just using my brain. It was all about, I would be able to walk out of a home knowing that I was going to get people some monetary help. And it was also grueling for them because psychologically they needed somebody to talk to. And I was always willing to listen. And I felt like I was really helping. And even to this day, I used to do individual assistance and inspect homes, but now I work in public assistance. And I help large entities, try to get help, such as like for COVID and on COVID claims that they had, and large entities. I work with local, state, and tribal and nonprofits. So no matter what I've been doing with my job for disaster recovery, it's not that it's exciting, it's a challenge. And challenge has always been a key word in my life, like I stated, all the way back to when I was growing up with people I couldn't keep up with as far as education, but proving to myself later that I could.
Fantastic. Gina, I want to thank you for coming on. I really appreciate it.
This was so much fun to just talk about everything, and thank you so much. I realize that, it's not about haunts and, psychic, but at least I had a little piece of me that I got to work with psychics. And I want to thank you so much for being open to having a discussion about something different.
Yeah, no problem. Yeah, no problem at all. It's fascinating to see, like any performer really, once they get out of that performing mode to see what their interests are, because you guys are human like anybody else, and yeah, it's just fascinating to me.
Well, thank you so much. And I really hope that your listeners enjoy this. Please go to my website at flyingtinkerbell.org. Joshua Schaefer Wonderful, wonderful man. He is my public relations manager, and he built the website, and he has done an amazing job. And I just want to thank your audience for allowing me to listen to something different. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you so much for coming on. You have a great rest of your weekend and all that stuff, but I just so appreciate it. Thank you.
All right. Thank you. Anytime. Bye.
All right. Have a good one. All right. That was Gina Rock. And we got a lot of history with her, not only as Tinkerbell, but, her other half of her life, which is something I wanted to cover because not every interviewer does that with her. And so I really wanted to get into that. There's always somebody behind the facade, as they say. So I will see you guys tomorrow at 6:30 p.m. Pacific. This is, of course, a pre-recorded show, so I don't know who the guest is going to be following it. But if you want to catch this show, we're going to be doing it on our Patreon site. It's going to go 2 weeks before the actual air date, so you guys get first look at it. But I hope you enjoyed it as much as I did. So again, if you're watching from Facebook and you haven't done so already, please hit that follow button, and that'll alert you when we have new videos coming out and for upcoming stuff. And of course, if you're on YouTube and you haven't done so yet, please hit that subscribe button, and that will also alert you. Plus, it helps me with the algorithm and stuff. And speaking of the algorithm, if you like what you heard tonight, please be sure to hit the like buttons and the thumbs up and the hearts and all that good stuff, because that puts me higher in the algorithm and things get things snowball from there. But again, I want to thank Gina for coming on, and I just totally am and just in awe of her for this career she's had, not only as Tinkerbell but the after stuff. So I will see you guys tomorrow, 6:30 p.m. Pacific. If you like the show, share it with 5 people. If you hated the show, share it with 5 of your enemies. Of course, we're equal opportunity here at California Haunts Radio. But again, I will see you tomorrow at 6:30, and have a great rest of your evening.